Tonight on Bridge City News, Canadian investigators are on their way to the crash site of where Ukrainian Flight 752 was downed, killing 176 people, including 57 Canadians. The province says no to extra funding for a full-time scan unit in our city to permanently shut down drug houses. And the Queen of England has agreed to let Prince Harry and Meghan live part-time in Canada. We will tell you where.
Your nation. Your province. Your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Robbins.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. 2 Canadian investigators are set to look over the wreckage of a Ukraine International Airlines plane and the spot where it was shot down last week, killing everyone on board, including 57 Canadians. The head of the Transportation Safety Board, Kathy Fox, says the access is more than Canadians would be allowed under international rules that guide these kinds of investigations. She says Iran's level of cooperation so far is very encouraging.
We have been in direct contact with the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, or AAIB, of the Islamic Republic of Iran since shortly after we learned of the accident. As announced last Thursday, and given the high number of Canadian fatalities, we have confirmed our role as an expert and accepted Iran's invitation to attend the accident site as entitled in Annex 13 to the Convention on International Civil Aviation. 2 TSB air accident investigators left Canada on Friday evening and over the weekend met up with members of the Canadian consular team in Turkey. They have since obtained visas to travel to Iran and departed earlier today for Tehran, along with members of Canada's consular team. In addition, the TSB will also deploy a second team of investigators with expertise in aircraft recorder download and analysis once we confirm where and when this activity will take place.
Dozens of people gathered in Toronto Monday to show solidarity with those in Iran who are protesting their government in the wake of the downing of the passenger jet, which killed 176, including more than 50 Canadians. Iran's president has called for a special court to investigate the crash and for all of those responsible to be punished. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Iran must allow for a full investigation to take place. Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, says the Iranian regime needs to take full responsibility for the downing of Flight 752.
It's crazy how we are in this place where fingers are being pointed at everyone except for the Iranian regime, who has been responsible for the deaths in this equation. It wasn't Donald Trump who brought down that plane. It was very upsetting for some people who wanted to believe that narrative. But it was the regime themselves. And you know what? We should just take a cue from the Iranian people who are on the streets demanding answers from their government about this plane, about the citizens of Iran who were killed on this plane senselessly, and demanding better.
Lisa will have more on the fallout from the Ukrainian plane being shot down, and now the United States is warning Iran not to kill its protesters. That's coming up in the second half of the show. The University of Lethbridge will be joining other universities across Canada tomorrow for a moment of silence honoring the victims of Ukraine Airlines Flight 752. The event will take place 11 a.m. at the Markin Hall Atrium at the U of L. Members of the community are invited to join in. A local Iranian resident is calling the plane crash in Iran tragic. Mohsen Syed Mahmoud grew up in Iran and says although he did not know anyone in the aircraft, he still feels the pain of what the families went through.
It's a human tragedy, primarily, before it becomes a personal tragedy. I did not have close families in the plane, but I certainly felt the pain that all the families went through when they heard about the impact, and all the goodbyes that was said just a minute ago turned out to be what it was. Any government would have to feel responsible for the comfort, peace, and well-being of the citizens that it's been elected to do. And I don't think that the Iranian government is any different from any other government in the world. The pain is pretty obvious in the faces of the people in the government in Iran today.
Mayor Chris Spearman is expressing his disappointment on behalf of city residents. He was recently informed by the province that Lethbridge will not be receiving additional funding to help low-income transit users like Calgary and Edmonton enjoy.
We have some of the highest rates of poverty in the province. So we want to make sure that families who live in Lethbridge, we understand roughly 1 in 5 children attending our school systems lives in at or below the poverty line, and of course those families need access to public transit, and we want to make sure that they access the same sort of programs. So of course we want to advocate for all of our citizens, and we want to make sure they have access to the same provincial programs that citizens in Calgary and Edmonton do.
In addition to hearing news that Lethbridge would not be getting funding to help for low-income transit, Spearman also received confirmation from the province that it will not be funding a full-time Safer Communities and Neighbourhoods or SCAN unit in Lethbridge right now.
We believe that cities like Lethbridge have as compelling a case for SCAN units as cities like Calgary and Edmonton. So we need to make sure that we're accessing the provincial resources that are available on an ongoing basis, just like they are available in the big cities.
SCAN is part of the Alberta Sheriff's and has the authority to shut down drug houses across the province. Police in Medicine Hat made another drug bust and arrested 2 people following a 2-month investigation by alert. Police seized methamphetamine, carfentanil, cocaine, and more than $1,300 in cash from a vehicle on Sunday. They say the 96 grams of carfentanil was one of the largest amounts of the drug they've received to date. A replica handgun was also taken from the vehicle. 44-year-old Ryan Porter of Calgary and 29-year-old Tristan Skapek of no fixed address face a wide variety of charges, including drug possession and drug trafficking. A warrant has also been issued for a 36-year-old woman in connection with the case. Lethbridge police need our help finding 20-year-old Ryan Clark. He was last seen on January 9th, and his family is concerned for his safety. He's described as 5 foot 9 inches tall, 150 pounds, light brown hair, and brown eyes. He was last seen walking in North Lethbridge wearing black jeans, a black-gray winter coat, a dark shirt, and black boots. If you've seen him or know of his whereabouts, call Lethbridge Police right away at 403-328-4444. Some of the colder temperatures overnight may have caused a water main break in South Lethbridge. Crews are on site working to fix the pipe. The city's water and wastewater operations manager says our cold weather is likely the culprit.
As the weather gets colder, we often see more and more water main breaks. The water in the river is colder, and so when it comes into our distribution system, the pipes can shift due to the temperature change. As this cold weather carries on, we will see frost going deeper and deeper into the ground, which will cause the ground to shift a little bit, which is just enough to cause leaks on our old water mains.
If you see water pooling on the streets or have a loss of water pressure in your home, call the city's 24-hour line at 311. The City of Lethbridge has adopted a new charter, and it involves play. Vicki Hazelwood with the Lethbridge Early Years Coalition says that play is important in early childhood development, and she says she's thankful city officials understand that.
We were thrilled about a year ago when City Council unanimously adopted the Lethbridge Play Charter. A year prior to that, almost 25 community organizations and stakeholders in the community had worked hard to create and develop the Play Charter. We presented it to City Council. They unanimously adopted that. And we moved forward then creating an action plan to really build awareness of just how important play is for children's development. Through play, children learn how to resolve conflict. They learn about themselves and the world around them. They learn how to regulate their emotions and just negotiate on different things with their peers.
A play summit will be held at the Lethbridge Public Library on Tuesday, January 21st. Anna Kirova from the University of Alberta will be the keynote speaker. January is Alzheimer's Awareness Month, and this year the theme is, Yes, I Live with Dementia. Let me help you understand. The theme focuses on the stigma people face with Alzheimer's. Now, according to the Alzheimer's Society research program, more than 500,000 people in Canada are currently living with some form of dementia, and in less than 15 years, that number is expected to double to almost 1 million.
Living with a diagnosis of dementia is really tough for someone who has a diagnosis, and for the care partners as well. The biggest thing is stigma brings a lot of fear to a person who has a diagnosis. They're afraid that they're going to be treated differently. They're going to be excluded from social functions. They're afraid that they're going to be talked around instead of talked to. And of course, there's going to be a lot of isolation that comes with that for the person with dementia and for the caregiver. People don't invite them out for book club. They don't invite them out for meals. They're afraid. The people who are their friends don't understand what it's like to live with dementia, and so they also are a little bit afraid of it.
Remus is inviting people to access the free resources online at ilivewithdementia.ca. Australia has been dealing with a huge outbreak of wildfires, especially in Victoria, South Australia. More than 20 people have died, homes have been destroyed, thousands of acres burned, and now there's an effort taking place to help animals who've been caught in the fires. Koalas are being rescued and brought to many animal hospitals, many of them with burns to their paws from clinging to the burning trees. As BCN's Loris Alexander explains, Purple Hippo Boutique in Lethbridge is asking for your help to bring healing to the animals of Australia.
I'm a huge animal lover, and just seeing these pictures and listening to the stories just kind of breaks your heart.
Volunteers all over the world have mobilized to help wildlife sanctuaries deal with the crisis, arming themselves with sewing machines and knitting needles.
There was a need for pouches for the kangaroos and koalas because right now they're in the breeding season and a lot of newborns being brought in. They're finding babies inside the deceased mothers and the koalas. So there's a lot of need for pouches, nests, koala mittens, just stuff like that to make the animals more comfortable, the ones that have been affected by the fires.
Dick from Lethbridge is one of many Canadians dedicating her time to collecting donations for the burned animals. She says the response from other Canadians working for this cause has been positive.
The response in Calgary has been huge. A lot of the other centers, I see a lot of response and a lot of people helping out. Lethbridge is getting there. I've had about, probably now since last week when I started this, probably about 30 people reach out to me.
Dick would like to encourage other crafters to get involved and lend their skills to the cause, and she hopes that people who don't share her hobby would donate money just so that they could acquire more mitts, nests, pouches, and more to animals in need. For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
The first giant panda twins that were born in Canada left the Calgary Zoo for China. The zoo says the cubs Ji Ya Pan Pan and Ji Ya Yu A, which translates to Canadian Hope and Canadian Joy, arrived safely in China, the homeland of their parents, after being flown out of Calgary early Friday morning. The cubs spent close to 2 years at the Calgary Zoo following their transfer with their parents from a Toronto zoo where they were born in 2015. The cubs' parents will remain in Calgary until the year 2023. A 32-year-old woman buried from an avalanche while skiing in Banff National Park has died from her injuries. Avalanche Canada says Laura Kosakowski was buried in a slide at Mount Hector north of Lake Louise on Friday while skiing. She was dug out and rushed to a Calgary hospital where she died the next day. The family doctor says she just skied her last run when she was engulfed in the avalanche that ran for about 550 meters. BC Premier John Horgan says the Coastal GasLink natural gas pipeline across northern British Columbia will go ahead despite protests. Horgan says the pipeline, which is part of LNG Canada's $40 billion liquefied natural gas export terminal project, has been granted approval by the courts.
Well, the rule of law applies in British Columbia. I was in this room a year ago answering similar questions, Keith, under much more difficult circumstances. We all remember how we felt as individuals and as British Columbians to see armed peace officers confronting British Columbians and their associates and their friends. We don't want to see that again, but we also want to have everyone understand that there are agreements from the Peace Country to Kitimat with Indigenous communities that want to see economic activity and prosperity take place. All of the permits are in place for this project to proceed. It will be proceeding.
Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland traveled to Newfoundland. Freeland, along with Natural Resources Minister Seamus O'Regan, met with the province's premier to discuss interprovincial trade and NAFTA. She also met with a group of Atlantic premiers, saying they're an example of how to collaborate around partisan differences.
Thank you, first of all, for hosting that fantastic and, from my perspective, very productive meeting of the Atlantic premiers yesterday. And the way the Atlantic premiers have figured out how to work together as a region, set aside partisan differences to some extent. We're all politicians, and really think about how to make Atlantic Canada work together is fantastic for the whole country, and a lot of the rest of us can learn a lot from you guys. And I very much look forward to the conversation. Lots of issues for us to discuss, of particular interest to Newfoundland and Labrador. I'm very glad to have a chance to talk about interprovincial trade. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about NAFTA.
A small tornado tossed around cars outside of a high school in South Carolina yesterday. The U.S. National Weather Service says the storm in Sampson County caved in part of a school roof, injuring 3 students.
We're student-centered, and what a blessing it is that only 3 students were injured and that those 3 students are going to be okay. We can fix this building, but students are our priority, and we're very blessed that they're okay.
The U.S. is removing more than 20 Saudi military students from a training program and sending them back to Saudi Arabia. This follows an investigation into a deadly shooting by a Saudi aviation student last month, which had ties to Islamic extremism.
This was an act of terrorism. The evidence shows that the shooter was motivated by jihadist ideology. During the course of the investigation, we learned that the shooter posted a message on September 11th of this year stating, "The countdown has begun." During the Thanksgiving weekend, he then visited the 9/11 memorial in New York City. While there is no evidence of assistance or pre-knowledge of the attack by other members of the Saudi military or any other foreign nationals who were training in the United States, we did learn of derogatory material possessed by 21 members of the Saudi military who were training in the United States. 17 had social media containing some jihadi or anti-American content.
Anti-Semitism seems to be on the rise in many parts of the world. Meryl Cates is the executive director of the anti-discrimination group Stand With Us Canada. She has an idea as to why anti-Semitism may be on the rise.
On the right, it's because of miseducation, misrepresentation, and that's what we try to correct. And on the left, it is about minorities, and it's risen again because Jews have always been, throughout history, the scapegoats for the ills of whatever a society is going through.
Watch the full interview with Meryl Cates from Stand With Us Canada discussing how we can combat anti-Semitism, coming up after Business News. Her Majesty, the Queen of England, has agreed to let Prince Harry and Meghan move to Canada part-time. The couple say they want more of an independent life from the royal family. Queen Elizabeth II said in a statement that, quote, "My family had very constructive discussions on the future of my grandson and his family. There will be a period of transition in which the Sussexes will spend time in Canada and the UK. Word is Harry and Meghan will be spending half of their time on Vancouver Island with their little son Archie." And you know, the island is a place that rarely hits minus 30 this time of year. The frigid temperatures for southwestern Alberta will be sticking around for a few days. Jeanette Rocher will have a complete look at the weather picture in just a moment. The cold snap will continue for our region. Jeanette Rocher is here with a look at the weather details, including a look at tomorrow's national temperatures.
Yes, Hal, that cold snap unfortunately sticking around for the next few days. Today's high was minus 23. We did experience a little bit of flurries there. The overnight low tonight will be minus 31 and into minus 24 tomorrow. Make sure you plug in that car. Into the 5-day forecast, minus 22 will be the high on Thursday, minus 23 for Friday. Saturday's high is going to rise to minus 9, and then we're going to finally get a little bit of reprieve into the plus temperatures, 3 degrees on Sunday, and a lovely 11 degrees for next Monday, and lots of sunshine. So cannot wait for that. Will be quite the difference after what we've been experiencing this week. The almanac highs and lows for this time of year, they tell us that the average high should be about minus 2, the average low around minus 14. Obviously, we're much lower than that these days. The highest temperature on record for this day was 12 degrees. It was in 1942, and the lowest temperature was minus 41. Look at that, in 1950. The sun rose this morning at 8:24 a.m. Set this afternoon at 4:57 p.m. It gave us exactly 2 minutes more of daylight than we had yesterday. Let's look at tomorrow's highs across the nation. Victoria will see a high of 3 degrees. Vancouver's high will be 1 degree tomorrow, and across Alberta, Edmonton, Calgary, unfortunately, their high tomorrow only minus 30 degrees, which is going to be just unbelievable. Saskatoon, minus 29 is the high, minus 26 in Regina. They have a chance of flurries. It should snow tomorrow in Winnipeg as well, with their high being minus 19. Over to our friends in Toronto, they're going to see a mixed bag of precipitation over there, a chance of rain turning to flurries. The high is 3 degrees. The high in Ottawa is 0 degrees. Same thing for Montreal. Both of those cities will be experiencing flurries tomorrow as well. Looking into Atlantic Canada, Fredericton's high tomorrow will be -1. Chance of flurries also expected in Halifax with a high of 2 degrees, a high of only -3 in Charlottetown. And St. John, Newfoundland will be experiencing a mix of sun and cloud with some flurries with a high of -8. And there you go. That's your forecast.
Personal insolvencies are expected to grow this year. Now, that's according to the National Association of Insolvency and Restructuring Professionals. The rate of filings increased in Canada 8.9% in November over the same 12-month period from the previous year. The group says the number of people struggling with debt in November is just the tip of the iceberg. The association said in a statement that most people wait until they have reached the breaking point before seeking help, making it more difficult for them to dig their way out. Hudson's Bay said it has appointed Ian Nairn as president of the Hudson's Bay department store chain. The company says Nairn assumed his new position on Sunday. Nairn comes to HBC from Kiki.K, a global design and stationery business where he served as CEO. HBC's CEO, Helena Folks, says she's excited to work with Nairn to help elevate the brand and drive performance. Nairn says few brands have the strong awareness and customer connection that Hudson's Bay enjoys, and he is thrilled to be joining the retailer. Boeing has a new CEO, and his name is David Calhoun. It is now up to Calhoun to deal with a crisis caused by 2 crashes and the grounding of the company's best-selling aircraft.
Anyone leading Boeing, I think, has 2 huge challenges right now. One is the technical challenge. That's all about getting the plane up and flying, getting the MAX back in the air, getting the certification done with the FAA. That's not an easy task, and I don't think one underestimates it. But then you have what I think is really the harder task, which is how do you restore confidence? And how do you get people feeling good about flying on the MAX? This is such a difficult situation for a new CEO. On the one hand, you have all this public pressure, all this government pressure coming at Boeing, and that's, a huge thing to deal with. But I also think clearly they have some internal issues they've got to address as well. The best thing working in his favor, I think, is that he's new and he's fresh and he's got this little window when he could step in to say this is a new time for Boeing.
The European Union says it has unveiled a plan to dedicate a quarter of its budget to tackling climate change. It has also set up a scheme to shift $1.45 trillion in investment towards making the economy more environmentally friendly over the next 10 years. The plan is aimed at delivering a promise to make the bloc the world's first carbon-neutral continent by the year 2050. It'll be funded by the EU budget and the private sector. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 59 points on the day to 17,352. The Dow Jones Industrial Average was up 33 points to 28,939. The S&P 500 was down almost 5 points to 3283. The Nasdaq was down close to 23 points to 9251. Oil was up 6 cents on the day to 58.14 per barrel. Natural gas was unchanged at $2.18. Gold was up a cent to $15.4641 per ounce, and silver was down a cent to $17.79 per ounce. Wheat is at $229 per metric ton, barley's at $232, canola's at $4.69, and corn is at $282 per metric ton. Live cattle were up 30 cents to $127.25. Feeder cattle were down 13 cents to $146.20. Lean hogs were up $1.78 to $68.23. And the Canadian dollar was down slightly on the day to 76.55 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, 2 Canadian investigators are set to look over the wreckage of a Ukraine International Airlines plane and the spot where it was shot down last week, killing all 176, including 57 Canadians. The University of Lethbridge will be joining other universities across Canada tomorrow for a moment of silence honoring the victims of Ukraine Airlines Flight 752. The event will take place 11 a.m. at the Markin Hall Atrium at the U of L. Members of the community are invited to join in. The Iranian regime says it was human error that brought down Flight 752, but was it really? Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari gives us her thoughts next. But first, here's a look at what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Ready to take the plunge? Southern Albertans are invited to take part in this year's Polar Plunge in support of Special Olympics, taking place Saturday, February 1st at Henderson Lake Park from 10 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Every dollar raised goes towards more than 3,300 Special Olympic athletes representing 140 communities across Alberta. Registration is $50 and comes with a pair of Polar Plunge gloves. For more details and to register, visit specialolympics.ca/Alberta Polar Plunge. Looking for a fun place where you and your kids can play? Come for a fun family night to the Family Center in downtown Lethbridge, Thursday evenings from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. Me and My Family promotes learning through play and provides a safe place for kids to explore through physical activity, imagination, and creativity. For more information, visit famcenter.ca. Do you or someone you love have a gambling problem? Is it causing chaos to your life and relationships? Gamblers Anonymous holds weekly meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays at Chinook Recovery Hall, 408 13th Street North, from 7 to 8:30 p.m. For more information and meeting times, call 403-331-0822 or visit albertaga.net. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
Many here in Canada are still in mourning after a Ukrainian passenger jet was shot down shortly after takeoff into Tehran, Iran, leaving 176 dead, including 57 Canadians. Iranian protesters are demanding leaders quit after the military admits it shot down the plane. Joining me now to talk about it is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari. Lisa, protests continue in Iran, and here in Canada, we want answers. Was it really human error that brought down Flight 752?
Human error, a mistake, did they miss intentionally on the missiles in Iraq? There's so many different explanations for all of this, but the bottom line is that they killed their own civilians. And of course, Canada, Ukraine, the UK, whoever had passengers aboard, their citizens aboard, that flight should be demanding answers from the Iranian regime. It's crazy how we are in this place where fingers are being pointed at everyone except for the Iranian regime, who has been responsible for the deaths in this equation. It wasn't Donald Trump who brought down that plane. It was very upsetting for some people who wanted to believe that narrative, but it was the regime themselves. And you know what? We should just take a cue from the Iranian people who are on the streets demanding answers from their government about this plane, about the citizens of Iran who were killed on this plane senselessly, and demanding better. I mean, they've been disenchanted with their government for a very, very long time. This government has been in place for 4 decades following the toppling of the Shah. And you have a population of 80 million, majority of whom are very much disenchanted. They want answers. They don't want their government putting them in the place of economic isolation under sanctions, putting them in the place of getting into wars with different countries, and more than anything, using their money, that Main Street economy money, and putting it into terrorism. Why should the people of Iran suffer or starve or go jobless while the government puts money into Hezbollah's pockets and into Gaza and into Syria and into Yemen and into Iraq, and the list goes on? So, the people of Iran are asking very important questions. I think Canadians are asking very important questions, and they're pressing Trudeau to press the Iranian regime here. This is not okay. We talk about war. We talk about, will there be a war with Iran? Well, what will war look like in the year 2020? The things that we're seeing right now, these are provocations that are, aspects of war, if otherwise known by a different name. I think it's absolutely, imperative for leaders around the world to unite, regardless of how they feel, regardless of how badly they wanted that Iran nuclear deal, to unite and ask the important questions.
U.S. President Donald Trump has a warning for Iran: do not kill your protesters. The United States is watching. Iranians are standing up and asserting their rights, with many yelling, "Death to the dictator."
Yes, so we see that the situation, the protests are getting more and more bold because of the slogans and the chants that we're hearing from the protesters. I've posted a lot of these videos from Iran that are sent to me with the chants that I translate, and more they're saying "death to the dictator," or "the dictator has to abdicate," or "we don't believe you anymore, you're liars and you kill our own, and we're going to avenge the deaths of our own brothers that were killed." And as these slogans get more and more courageous, we know that the Iranian people, they want better. They want a different tomorrow. They don't want to continue with this government. The issue with the Iranian protesters has always been who will lead them in the next chapter, if there should be a regime change, if they should be successful in toppling this current regime. But I think more than anything, we have to understand how so many of these narratives that are flying around Western media are so incorrect about how Iranians were upset about the death of Soleimani, about how they're upset at America for starting this tit for tat kind of exchange between the Iranian regime and the U.S. And so on. But more than anything, we're seeing how these protesters are upset. They're not going back home. I mean, more than 1,500. I mean, some estimates say 1,500, but from what I'm hearing, it's well into 2,000 or 3,000 protesters were killed last month in protests across Iran. Now, will that happen again? Will they start killing them again? The main goal of this regime has always been to stay in power, and they will do anything to remain in power. And I'm afraid this is going to get bloodier and worse before it gets any better.
Meanwhile, chants of death to England could be heard outside of the British embassy in Iran and calling for the ambassador to be expelled and the embassy to be shut down. The British ambassador was arrested, and the UK says it's a violation of international law. Tell me more about that.
Yes, so here we have these, again, inconvenience of truth, as we say, for the Europeans who have wanted so badly to stay on good terms with the Iranian regime. For 40 years, every time there has been an issue, especially with the United States pulling out, not having a consulate there, not having diplomatic relations with the Iranian regime, the Europeans have remained. They have pushed for this economic relationship with Iran. And now you see the Consul General there attended what he says was a prayer vigil for the victims of the Ukrainian flight, but it turned out to be a protest against the government. And right away when he left, he was arrested for attending an anti-government protest. Now, again, this highlights that the Europeans have no business remaining on the side of the Iranian regime when this is how they're treated, when their own are arrested and thrown into Iranian prisons, when they know, and we have proof, that the Iranians are cheating on the nuclear deal and had been cheating even when they were a signatory to that deal. So, this is yet another story about how Europeans are getting caught in this kind of crossfire between the West and the Iranian regime and choosing to remain with the Iranian regime, but it's nothing new.
Meanwhile, in Afghanistan, Lisa, a couple of U.S. troops were tragically killed by another roadside bomb.
Yes, this is in Kandahar. This is in the southern province. Another attack claimed by the Taliban that have really no shame in claiming these attacks against U.S. civilians and then U.S. citizens rather, and then pretending like all is well when they want to come back to the negotiating table between the Taliban and the United States to create stability in Afghanistan. That's the irony of the whole situation. This terror organization will be entrusted with creating any sort of stability within Afghanistan, and this is the way that they have behaved over and over again. Hal, you and I, week after week, talk about these different attacks by the Taliban, usually against civilians in Afghanistan, but this time against U.S. military personnel, which makes it obviously hit closer to home. But will this put more of a strain on the ongoing talks? Will this put kind of a pause? We've had ceasefires before. We've had a hiatus from the talks between the Taliban and the United States. But the reality doesn't change. Another day, another terror attack, and this is the group that we're dealing with. It's the Taliban. But really, it's very, very sad to see Afghanistan not be able to achieve that stability for its people, for our troops out there, for everyone who's involved.
Hezbollah has been threatening U.S. troops and has vowed retaliation against Israel. They say it's payback for the U.S. strike which killed Iran's top general, Soleimani.
All right. So when we say Hezbollah, we should really just say it's a tentacle of the Iranian regime. Hezbollah is equivalent with the Iranian regime that propped up or created that terror organization in the aftermath of the 1979 toppling of the Shah. They created Hezbollah to do their dirty work in the region and to do their proxy work. And ever since then, they've created this cancerous sore for Lebanon that has attacked Israel, that has been responsible for dozens and dozens of horrific terror attacks that have targeted Western and Israeli targets. And now they have again threatened the U.S. obviously for the killing of Soleimani, who is a part of course, the Revolutionary Guard, another tentacle of the Iranian regime. Again, business as usual for these terror organizations. This man Soleimani was a valuable asset to the Iranian regime, to their proxy work, to their regional endeavors. He was operating in Syria, but had a hand in Iraq and in throughout the Middle East in ordering the attacks. You want to look at the different places in the Middle East where Iran had activities, in Yemen, in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Gaza, and Soleimani was involved in all of that, including ordering the deaths of protesters to be killed back at home when they rose up last month. So, this guy was a point man. He was a smart guy. He was called the shadowy commander because nobody could catch him. So now that he's been caught, it's a big blow to Iran. It's a big blow to their tentacles. It's a big blow to Hezbollah. So it's as easy as that. So when these threats come in, it's nothing new. And we saw some retaliation. Now, what will happen next? Who knows?
A story which made headlines across Canada here and the world was how Canadian officials accidentally pushed the nuclear alert to millions of people. The nuclear station located in Pickering, Ontario, just east of Toronto, triggered the mass emergency alert here in Canada that was sent accidentally. Lisa, it kind of sounds a bit like a Homer Simpson moment.
Yeah, exactly. It is like when you say smartphones not being so smart or smart technology not being so smart. Look, this is the side effect of having all this technology and the ability to reach people so quickly is the ability to incorrectly, accidentally reach people so quickly. Think about how many posts people put up accidentally or hit a button or text people accidentally. I mean, this is on a massive scale. But now at least the people around Toronto know that the system works, and God forbid there should be something, they know that this will work. But again, the downside of this being this is like the boy who cried wolf. Should this happen again, if it is accurate, will people believe it, or will they just kind of shrug and say it's probably another accident? So we have both sides of that, but accidents happen.
That's true. The U.S. and China have resumed regular talks in an effort to resolve various conflicts between the countries. Tell me more about that.
Yes, so interestingly, after this Soleimani craziness kind of, I don't want to say blew over, but it was kind of put on the back burner on a Monday morning, we wake up to the news that, President Trump is gung-ho about taking the China deal further. We are told that the phase one aspect of the deal is done and that we're looking forward to phase two and to move forward with more further or more details of the deal between the two countries. We know for a fact that the reason that the deal didn't work out the first time is because there are certain points that China will not compromise on and that the U.S. is a no-go on. So these are the non-negotiables for President Trump, and they particularly involve intellectual property and copyright laws and things like that, things that the Chinese have been known to do to the U.S., to copy everything that the U.S. does, whether it's in technology or in luxury goods or in drones or anything else. So this will be interesting to see how far the U.S. and China can get this round. And we know that there has been economic damage on both sides. We know that both sides, when you look at the exporters and importers, are eager for there to be a deal and for the tariffs to be reduced. So we'll see how far they get this time around.
The White House has reached out to North Korea to resume talks, Lisa. U.S. President Donald Trump has even personally reached out to Kim Jong-un, saying he wants to chat again.
Yes, it looks like President Trump is definitely interested in becoming the foreign policy president. He's going down his checklist of unresolved items, loose ends that he must tie up before elections. And North Korea is obviously on that list. He was very much enthused, as was most honest people, that he was able to get that first sit down with Kim Jong-un, who was this isolated, sleeping giant. And now, he has to keep poking that giant in order to move this forward. Very interesting relationship between the two. There have been letters that have been exchanged. They became pen pals. They became greatest of friends. And then they also exchanged quite, stringent comments between the two. So we'll see how this moves forward. But I think, again, North Korea is not as it's a different threat than we have with the Iranian regime. The North Koreans are quite isolated versus the Iranian regime that's looking to export its agenda throughout the world, throughout the Middle East at the very least. So, you have the North Koreans that are isolated. Donald Trump wants to break that isolation, wants to create a normalized nation out of them. And we'll see if Kim Jong-un is interested in the offer.
Now, here's an interesting story. A 44-year-old Japanese billionaire has a cool idea for a date. He wants to take a girl to the moon. I want to give you the moon. Whatever happened to dinner and a movie? That's what I want to ask you.
Yes, this billionaire has decided that he wants to take that trip up to the moon, and now he's looking for the most eligible girl to take along with him. He has 3 children. He just recently broke up with his 27-year-old girlfriend, and he's fresh on the market and has a fresh idea as to what a romantic first date will be. And what are the qualifications? She has to be single and over 20 years of age. So eligible ladies, start signing up and see if you can take that trip with him.
Now, speaking of ladies, the only woman to ever win an Olympic medal for Iran just defected. Kimia Alizadeh won a bronze medal in Taekwondo at the 2016 Games in Rio de Janeiro. And Lisa, she says enough's enough when it comes to oppression.
She's done. She had the most beautiful Instagram post saying goodbye to her people, goodbye to her country, and goodbye to the men in the regime who oppressed her for many years. Last night, I sat and translated this very long, detailed Instagram post in which she says goodbye to her people and says, "It was your support that got me to where I am, but I was always a political and economic pawn for the leaders of our country, and I will no longer be that pawn. I'd rather be nothing because I was nothing to them. And they will always look down upon me because I was a woman." So she made an incredible and selfless decision to leave her country to go to the Netherlands, to start all over. And again, like you said, she's a champion. She's, instead of staying in the country in which she represented and being the superstar that she is, she's forced to leave the country and to, just to be free as a woman. Where are the women's rights, movement leaders on this story and on stories like these? When you hear about this, she can't live a normal life as a female athlete in this country of Iran. And these are the stories that we should be telling. These are the stories that really paint a broader picture about the reality of women, the reality of minority groups in the Middle East, and make us, very fortunate that we have this platform and that we should use it to tell these stories and to be a voice for them.
And it'd be quite the story, too, if she were to compete for the Netherlands in an upcoming Olympics, wouldn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me once again from Los Angeles. Thanks so much, Lisa.
My pleasure.
Anti-Semitism has been an ongoing issue for many, many years. We've been hearing about it a lot lately, especially with the recent attacks in New York City. What fuels anti-Semitism and what really can be done about it? Joining me today to talk about it is Meryl Cates, Executive Director with Stand With Us Canada. Meryl, you're joining us today from Toronto. Welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you. Good to meet you. Thanks for having me.
Now, Meryl, what exactly is your organization all about?
It's about education. This is an 18-year-old organization all over the world that was founded in LA and Canada. Our branch was founded 7 years ago. And we want to educate students on campuses and the community about Israel and fight anti-Semitism.
Now, do you feel that anti-Semitism is on the rise globally? I mean, I've seen some of the rabbis and Orthodox Jews being attacked for no apparent reason on the streets of New York, even some instances here in Canada. Do you think it's really on the rise?
Yes, it's definitely on the rise. And it's on the rise in both sides of the spectrum, from the right and from the left, and it's very, very frightening.
Why do you think that is exactly?
On the right, it's because of miseducation, misrepresentation, and that's what we try to correct. And on the left, it is about minorities, and it's risen again because Jews have always been, throughout history, the scapegoats for the ills of whatever a society is going through. It's societal.
It almost seems like ever since God says, "You are my chosen people," they've been persecuted. Now, the federal government recently made a decision to change diplomatic course in voting against Israel at the United Nations and voting for a North Korean resolution that challenges the legitimacy of Israel, Merrill. Many see this as something that was done to gain favor in an attempt to secure a seat on the UN Security Council. Your thoughts?
Yes, I understand that that may have been the reason for it, but it was still felt as though it had been a betrayal by the Jewish community, because we have become accustomed to being an ally of the only democracy in the Middle East.
Now, a group called UN Watch has collected more than 46,000 signatures for an online petition calling on Trudeau to reverse Canada's vote. Do you think that that will actually accomplish anything?
I hope it makes a difference. I hope that the powers that be read petitions and are interested in what the people have to say and their reaction to these votes. It shouldn't just be Jews that are protesting this vote. It should be all of us that cares about our place in the world.
Now, the United Nations has a long history of resolutions that negatively target Israel. Why do you think that is?
Well, if you look at the Human Rights Council, you will see that all of the countries that are on that council are the greatest abusers of human rights. The United Nations for decades has been taken over by countries that have nothing to do with democracy.
How many nations in the world are currently friendly towards Israel?
Many are, but the United Nations is a political body. And so the votes in the United Nations are something very different than the kind of support Israel may be receiving from other democracies in the world.
Now, why is there so much opposition to the actual state of Israel? I know they are often perceived as the bad guys because they have a significant military and because of the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza.
Well, I would tell you that it's propaganda. And I would say that it is about that kind of education. And the education has been clearly negative. And a young country, Israel, 70 years old, is certainly not without fault or flaws, but nevertheless, the propaganda and the misrepresentation about one of the most democratic and humanitarian countries in the world is what most people are hearing and seeing in the media.
So there's a lot of education as well that we have to start teaching our children at a young age that Israel and the Jews are actually good people.
I think we do. I think we have to teach tolerance for all other religions. I think we have to teach what human rights and civil rights really are about. And we have to teach them history. They need to learn about the Holocaust. They need to learn about the fact that if there's anti-Semitism, it's because Jews have been persecuted throughout history.
Now, Meryl, let's talk about the BDS movement against Israel. BDS standing for Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions. There are groups that encourage individuals and businesses to target Israel with this, correct?
Absolutely. And culturally as well. Culturally, economically. I think you're probably aware that that is a propaganda movement that has taken over a lot of academia as well.
So how do businesses actually fight back against that or that perception?
We actually support them, and other communities and community organizations do. So, for instance, we heard of a store in our community that was being targeted by BDS activists, and their business was suffering. So we alerted the community, and we went and we bought the product, which in this case was SodaStream, made in a factory by mostly Palestinian workers in Israel who wouldn't have work otherwise. And we increased the sales of the store by double in 1 month. So it's a matter of educating people.
Are there businesses, universities, and other groups from across Canada supporting the BDS movement?
Yes, there are. Well, certainly our government does not. But there are university student unions, not administrations, that have passed resolutions that support BDS. And of course, even though it's toothless, because the administration policy may not change at all, it's very difficult, and it makes Jewish students feel uncomfortable and vulnerable.
Yeah, some Canadian university groups have held Israel anti-apartheid weeks on campus. Meryl, why are they actually doing this, and how would you respond to their claims of apartheid?
Well, we actually brought a speaker years ago from the head South African government political leader who explained just exactly what apartheid is. Apartheid is a tenets of a government. It's constitutional tenets of policy of a government. Israel is none of those. There's the apartheid lie is something that is being communicated to supposedly recruit students and faculty to care about the Palestinian cause, when in fact it really hurts Palestinians, as in the example of SodaStream. That factory had to close and move.
And you know, the strange thing is, even though Israel is the only true democracy in the Middle East, and they're quite liberal actually with the social policies, yet they tend to be negatively viewed by most Western academics. Why do you think that is?
It's amazing to us, and we see it happening slowly, and now, as you say, it's become a growing phenomenon, and we believe that part of it, the anti-Israelism, is just anti-Semitism, and the rest is just misdirected, misguided acceptance of propaganda that would make people feel that they are helping an underdog. And in fact, most of the Palestinian territories, as you would be aware, is ruled by the Palestinian Authority, a corrupt dictatorship. And it's the leadership that we are trying to help when we promote peace and coexistence. And those efforts are being made all the time in Israel.
Now, from your point of view, do Western media sources actually cover Middle Eastern events fairly? Or do you think there might be a little bit of a bias there?
I know there's a bias. I know there's a bias. There have been books and reports and articles written about it by reporters and journalists that are on the ground. And the bias is created by foreign correspondents who are there because if it bleeds, it leads. And there is a story, and sometimes a made-up story, completely fake, where it looks as though there have been some abuses. And in war, the collateral damage, unfortunately, is on both sides. We as an organization and as a people, I think, should simply have empathy for both and be working towards peace instead of condemning, boycotting, those words we all heard about from the 30s and 40s in Germany.
Do you think we'll ever see peace in the Middle East?
I hope. I certainly hope that we will. It's about leadership, and again, it's about education. And that is something that needs to change. There's lots of wonderful projects that are going on between Israelis and Palestinians that work together and make peace together, but it will take time.
You know, something worth considering as well, Meryl, is the fact that Arabs living in Israel do have citizenship rights, including religious freedom and voting rights. In fact, many Arab women can vote as well, which is not always the case in neighboring countries, correct?
Not at all the case in neighboring countries. They certainly don't have the rights of Arab women anywhere in Israel, who one of whom is the chancellor of a major university and are CEOs of organizations. And women have the same rights as any democracy in Western society in Israel. And Arab women are subject to fundamentalist policies generally.
Now, your website has an interesting section which highlights Israel's efforts to provide humanitarian assistance to Syrian refugees. Tell me more about that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Syrian refugees and Syrians know, many of them, that they can go to an organization like Stand With Us. They can go to the IDF through whatever channels are safe for them and be rescued and taken out of the zone if possible, and brought, many of them, to Israeli hospitals for treatment. And unfortunately, it's not something that's known. It's not something that's known that Israel as a nation is often the first on the ground with humanitarian aid all over the world. After an earthquake or flooding or whatever natural disaster happens to another country, Israel's there.
Meryl, do you have any suggestions as to what our government and the Canadian public can do to reduce anti-Semitism?
I would like to see people look at more than one source in their news, particularly young people. I would like to see more education, not only for students, but faculty. People in our community have to learn more about each other so that we can be more tolerant of each other. And I would like to see our government also take a closer look at the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to understand why we don't want to be partnered with dictatorship regimes like North Korea, but we do want to be on the side of our democratic allies at the UN.
I'm surprised with all of the evidence that there is in a history of the Holocaust that people still deny the existence of the Holocaust. What are your thoughts on that?
It's amazing. It's simply amazing when we feel as a small Jewish community that we have done so much Holocaust education, and then the studies come out that so many in our community don't know that there was a Holocaust, don't believe that there was a Holocaust. We simply have to do a great deal more, and we have to call on our friends and our allies in the Christian and every other community to help us as well, to make people understand. We have to speak up and speak out, just as that rally in New York told us a couple of weekends ago. We can't be silent anymore because that must be what happened years ago.
And what's that expression? We have to learn from our past or we may repeat it in the future?
Yes, we thought that was something that was reality for everyone, but it seems not to be. And also we're dealing with misinformation all of the time, and we have to be able to correct it.
Meryl Cates, Executive Director of Stand With Us Canada, thanks for joining me today from Toronto.
Thank you for having me, Hal. Thank you.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.